What's going on, Badger Nation? Welcome to the PPC Den podcast, the world's first and longest running show all about Amazon PPC to make your Amazon advertising life a little bit easier and a little bit more profitable. Today on the show, one of my favorite people that we have here, Mike Freakey, has had an exceptional career, an exceptional thinker, and if you are at all interested in leveling up your Amazon marketing management, Amazon marketing skills, particularly in the sense of like, how does knowledge scale at a company? You know, I have lots of people write in and they say, oh, I tell my team to listen to the PPC Den podcast every week. Shout outs to you if you have done that, or if you are currently listening because someone from your team told you to listen on every week. We appreciate you. Thank you for that. And hopefully we deliver. And that being said, like, how do you ensure that everyone shares that knowledge on a day-to-day micro action basis? Because while we come out with one new episode a week, we've got almost 300 episodes. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So let's jump into the episode. And before we do, because there is so much information, we actually have a Google Sheet with our episodes categorized and turned into tasks. So it's almost like a task sheet that you can export and upload into your project management tool. It's in the description. Go and get it. It's one of my favorite things. We call it like the Badger Guide to Amazon PPC advertising. I really enjoy it. We update it periodically when the new episodes come out. Anyway, without further ado, shout out to Mike. Thank you so much for coming on the show and enjoy this one. Good one.
I've launched campaigns and picked keywords. I've got my bids, set placements too, and bad mistakes. I've made a few. I've had my share of wrong keywords, but I've gone through. We are the PPC Den, my friends, and we'll keep up the rising to the end. You two are the PPC Den. We talk about Amazon. No time for mannequins, 'cause we fix the gambits of the world.
Mike, what's up? Love the shirt, man.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for repping the badge.
Oh yeah.
How are you? I'm doing quite all right. It's a perfect time here in Austin. Early summer. It hasn't been too hot.
Nice.
Soon it'll be 115. Trying to escape though. Got to escape the heat.
I was gonna say, enjoy this while you can.
Seriously. For real. What about you? Any fun summer plans?
In about a week, next Saturday, I am flying over to Japan for a week, followed by China for 3 weeks.
Wow. Why those places?
Japan because I've always wanted to go. I'm gonna spend a week in Tokyo for the first time ever, and then China to meet my girlfriend's parents.
Wow. That's a big, huge deal.
Oh, absolutely.
Huge deal traveling across the country, meet your girlfriend's parents.
I'm
Wow.
pumped for it. It's gonna be a really
Wow.
good time.
Is there any unique custom that is customary in a Chinese relationship that maybe...
Yeah, the big thing I've learned is that there's an expectation that, like, for any family member I meet, I have to give some sort of a gift. And so I'm definitely not used to like any sort of like a gifting thing. Like when she met my parents, she met my mom like within like the first 4 months of her relationship. It's like, really,
Right.
is that okay? I was like, oh, this is not a big deal for us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what should I give her? Like a smile? I don't know.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's really... Yeah, I believe that to be... people say that about business relationships too. Like you don't show up empty-handed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's normally like a bottle of bourbon or something.
Exactly. And it's funny because her mom like keeps asking her like, oh, like what does Mikey want? What do we got to get ready for him? Like, have a bed for him, like
Right.
a desk for him to work. Like tell her I like cookies. If you tell her I
Right.
like cookies, she'll make cookies. She'll feel great about it because she's giving
Yeah.
me something.
Where in China?
Wuhan.
Cool.
Yeah. It was very funny when we first started dating, and I was like, "Oh, by the way, like you haven't told me like where in China are you from?" Like, "Oh, a town called Wuhan. Maybe you've heard of it." Like, "Yeah, I watched the news."
Made the news at some point. I don't remember why, but it made
Yeah,
the
no,
news.
no idea why.
And how's your Amazon advertising life?
Crazy, but like in a really good way.
What's
Uh,
crazy?
Yeah, it's been just like so busy.
Mm-hmm.
We've been I've only been in this new role for 3 months now, but we've gone at least like 2 to 3 times faster than like any of like our like most aggressive projections we're gonna go, which is great. Like it's all really good things. I've started to hire significantly faster than I was expecting to hire, which is fun.
Are you talking about what's 2 to 3 times higher?
Like sales. Yeah, bringing on new clients.
What's the new role?
I am managing partner at IGPPC.
Wow.
Yeah,
Congrats.
so I get to talk to Isaac every day, just like give him a call, go like, "Hey Isaac, I got to talk about something." It's a lot of fun.
Very cool. So the growth goals, meaning the agency itself, is
Yeah.
growing faster.
Yes,
What do you attribute that to?
combination of Isaac in terms of just like the getting the leads for us, but I'm going to toot my own horn a little bit. The close rate has been incredibly high. I know a lot of that has been like I know we've had conversations about brand analytics.
Mm-hmm.
That is a staple of every single audit that I do.
Right.
We also like my focus is entirely on how can I make this next like 45-minute conversation the most valuable conversation that this person is going to have this week. Like I'm not a salesman at all, really. I'm more of just like hey, let's talk about some really cool stuff. And if you like talking about really cool stuff, we should probably work together. And
Right.
if you don't, hey, at least you have some really cool stuff.
Totally.
But it's been funny, like how many people after I have that conversation with them, they're like, "Yeah, we want to move forward, but we want to like put in the contract we have to work with Mike." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's kind of the idea actually at this point. Is like anybody I'm signing, you're working with me." So
Yeah. How does that scale?
I think the long-term goal of it, I'll hire out a team. I will train them up on a lot of the ways that I see things. I also want people who are like going to challenge me and do their own research and find like new ways that we can expand our philosophy. And at a certain point, we'll find people who clients are like, "Yeah, I want to work with them too." At a certain point, we'll have it be more of a, depending on the client. Some of them, I'm a control guy. I'm not going to give up the clients I really, really like. But I think we'll end up having situations where I'm like hey, like every month, let's hop on a call. Let's just talk like your business high level. Let me act as like a performance manager to talk strategy with my team. But then back end execution and like day-to-day management ends up going back to the team. Again, that's a thing that really has to go client by client. And so to a certain point, like my fear is there's some levels of that does not inherently scale. Like there is only so many hours a day for me. So that's where I also wanted to see like where can I use tech to help make more things viable too.
Before we talk Amazon strategy,
Yeah.
one interesting question that I think any brand, whether you are working on your own campaigns in-house or you are a team managing many brands' accounts, is how to curate and display and essentially enforce that philosophy. You mentioned something like, I want to be sure that I'm logging my philosophy and people are logging that philosophy, but also have the opportunity to challenge me. It's difficult in practice.
It is.
I've heard and felt and seen and experienced myself. And I often see companies fall into maybe one of 3 buckets. One is heavy SOPs, like heavy standard operating procedures, like do it this way, to the point where the person doing the SOP could be completely removed from like overall strategy. And like they're just sort of going in and they're following a checklist. And anyone who's even an untrained Amazon PPC person could follow that process. Like, I can give it to, someone who's, new on the internet. And as long as there's like images, they can just click through it and get the thing done. At the other end of the spectrum, there's almost like no SOPs related to strategy, where it's just like everyone you hire, you sort of trust them that they know what they're doing. You hire experienced people and you hope that there's enough overlap in terms of your overall approach.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's something in the middle where like certain things are SOP'd, certain things are not. I'm curious on a practical level, like using things like meetings or project management boards or sync meetings or ClickUp boards or, anything, Google Docs. How do you envision that going? Like, imagine you had 5 people tomorrow and you're like, you interviewed them. They were all great. They all have great experience, but they're all do things slightly different than you do right now. How do you, whether this question is relevant for brands or companies that like agencies, how do you envision that actually happens?
Well, let me ask you a quick question before I dive into that. I'm not sure what we have to like talk about on the pod today.
Yeah.
Do we want like building an Amazon team to be that topic that we dive into on the pod?
I started doing something, I don't know if you noticed, but I started hitting record right away.
Oh,
so
really?
so we've already been recording.
Oh, amazing.
It absolutely could be like I think it's so relevant because there's a lot, right? There's like the brands that, maybe they have an in-house skilled person and then maybe it does scale.
Yeah.
And now there's like 3 or 4 people who are involved with the PPC, the SEO tracking, like all these things. And it's like, how does everybody there get on the same page? Or is it a constant game of ping pong? Like somebody does something, somebody else reacts, somebody else reacts, somebody else reacts. And like, eventually they hope to get there. Like they're all like taking turns kicking a rock into a goal. And, most of the time it'll roll forward. So yeah, I think it's such a fascinating question. And I think like both from a intellectual question of like, how does any team, able to sort of have their backs to each other and like, taking on all the challenges that are approaching them, knowing that like everybody's got their back and like the same level of training and like the same level of everything, in order to get things done the way that whoever's in charge sees them getting done. And not only that, but how does that person in charge also get individual people's experience and individual people's feedback to actually improve that system over time? I think it's easier to talk about in a philosophical sense. And I think it's actually quite difficult to do on a tangible, like look at the screen, because it's tough. There's a lot of things that are flying at you at any given point in time. So it's difficult to sort of pause and think of those systems.
No, I mean,
and think of the implementation. Yeah.
Yeah. So like for me, this is going to be my 3rd time hiring out and building my own team from truly nothing. When I was at my first agency, I was one of the first people to volunteer. All of the other volunteers were like, hey, you kind of got drafted into this situation. If you want to stop working on Amazon, we're just going to give everything over to Mike. And then I built up the rest of the team myself. When I moved over to Perch, same thing. I came in as the only person in the company that had any sort of advertising experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to build up that team too. The couple of things that I've really enjoyed about those processes, one is getting people of very different experience levels. I actually am a big fan of investing in and developing smart people who show good instincts. Yeah. I think there's a lot of specificity for how to do things in Amazon that you'll only know once you've been doing it for a certain amount of time. And that gives us like a really small market of people to try to bring into any given organization. If that's the bar, like needing that level of experience is what you really need. And honestly, some of the best people I've hired never once been in Amazon's back end. Couldn't tell you anything about what it means to be an Amazon seller. But when I show them some Amazon data and I say, hey, just tell me what you're seeing in here, they're able to break down, well, hey, we should be looking at keyword trends. Hey, we need to be identifying the right goals for these brands. and not everything they say is going to be right. I know like impressions as a general metric is people have like a love-hate relationship with. I stand by it. If someone says like, oh, here's what we can do to grow impressions, I say like, I do not care about growing impressions, because the easiest way you can grow impressions is show up on product detail pages. You're not going to love the performance you get if all you're doing is showing up on product detail pages. But someone who doesn't work in Amazon yet won't know that. And that's okay.
Right.
So I think yeah, go for it.
So a couple things. Number one, I love a metric, profit per impression, PPI.
Okay.
So if anyone ever talks about impressions, I always like to comment about, okay, yes, impressions matter and like more is better, but it's really like profit per impression, like more is better in that regard. Like what is our total profit by impressions? And like that should be the number that scales. So like if impressions go up and our profit per impression goes down, like that's something to your point. You can increase impressions and have your profit per impression go way down. I love to mention that. The other thing too is something very specific, because I think this is so true, because I don't think a lot of people, and I think it's true both on the brand side or if you're a marketing agency, is like, how do you actually invest in a person? So you mentioned like you were building teams and you noticed people and you invested more time into them. What does that actually look like? Because I'm picturing a brand owner who's got somebody on their team who has interest in this stuff. How common is this, right? Where somebody has interest in this stuff, they start to like the back end of things. They like to start to look at these spreadsheets and come up with things like, how do you tangibly invest? Like, what is the actions that someone should take if they want someone on their team to excel in these skills, right? Like, as we talk about growing a team, it's like people probably listening already have a team. Like, how do you actually, what is the actual steps to invest in someone to improve their skills on the back end there?
Yeah. So I do try, whenever I am working with people I hire, I will hear my actions with them to the way that I believe they learn best. Mm-hmm. And that's through a lot of conversations, right? Like I'm trying to figure out how can I work with someone in the best way to unlock their potential. For some people, that is a lot of availability, but in an office hours sort of approach, we say, hey, I'm going to block off this time. If you don't need it, don't come. I'm going to be doing my own thing. And that's absolutely fine. But if you do, and it's more of a inspiration strikes at the right moment, and they say, I want to be able to talk to somebody about this. Mike, what's your experience with this? Here's what I'm doing, that sort of thing. For some people, it's more of they do not need a lot of like that more immediate validation on what they're working on. And it's more of, hey, let's have one conversation every month about the high level direction of what we're doing. And as long as we're aligned on that high level direction, I'm going to focus myself fully. And obviously, of course, like I always want to tell people, if you're just running into a brick wall over and over again, don't do that. Seek help, whether it's from me, like go to another source, whoever you trust, that's fine. But making sure that people feel like there is the ability to push themselves, but once they get to a certain point, do they have other resources that they can go to? And so it's not saying I'm giving people everything in the world and doing their job for them, but it's making sure that with people who have a good work ethic and have the aptitude to learn, then give them those tools to be able to push themselves further.
Yeah. I would say key statement at the end there is like push themselves. Like, I think in this industry, you have to be self-motivated to want to progress your skills. I would say it's going to be incredibly difficult to, like, courses are a part of it, like content is a part of it. So like I imagine like a brand owner might say, hey, go listen to every episode of the PPC Den podcast. Every week, tune in, check it out. And there's one thing to like be told to do something, but there's the other thing, like you want to be a self-motivated person. Like there should already be like the drive to push it. And I think that's incredibly key in our industry because things change so frequently. Like there's always a new screen to look at. There's always a new thing to do. There's always new data that can inform your actions, that if you're not inherently hungry to go find those things, it's going to be really hard to lead that person if they're not just genuinely curious about like finding the new opportunity. So I think that's a really key thing that I know that when I bring people on board, I'm trying to look for those things. I'm trying to look like, maybe in an interview, like what's the latest Amazon update that got you excited and why?
Yeah.
And how has that changed what you do? Like, people should have a good answer to that. And I'm curious too, like, let's say that I'm a brand owner and like I was always iffy at Amazon PPC. I was always like, okay. And maybe they're not the expert in their Amazon PPC, like meaning, they don't consider it a strength of theirs. How can a leader, invest in people without being the expert themselves?
Ooh. So let me repeat this back to you just to make sure I understand the question. So we're talking about these situations where maybe you're a brand owner and you are not an Amazon advertising expert, but you're trying to get your team to develop that expertise.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
This is a really fun one.
Right.
So I'm going to contextualize this answer by saying when I got into the space, everybody who I worked with were Google Ads people or Google SEO people. And Amazon was just this idea that we knew we wanted to do more with, but nobody had any experience with it.
Right.
The important things there were, one, trying to find anybody that we could have a trusted conversation with where we could at least ask the dumb questions.
Yeah.
In my specific case, me and another coworker, we had a few clients. They had been with the business on a Google side for a very long time. They had Amazon businesses, and if anything, their Amazon business was maybe as big, if not bigger, than their Google side. And we said, like, we had to have that trusted relationship. We said, we're going to ask you stupid questions. We hope that's okay. And I would attribute a lot of my personal growth to being able to have those conversations in that safe position. Mm-hmm. I'll tie to that having mentorship in any form is an important thing. And I think that kind of goes to my idea of like, what is a core philosophy? Again, you may not have all of the expectation, like full understanding of how Amazon works, how to set bids to the right level. But if you can at least have a core philosophy around, are we trying to generate profits, or are we trying to be efficient, or are we trying to impact top line? What are we comfortable with doing? And then understanding, I have this bucket that I'm willing to live inside of. Now I can start looking at resources and asking the questions of what is the best way for me to do that. So even if as the business owner, I don't have the answers to all of those questions, if I can at least give that sort of structure to somebody, I am now shrinking what is a fairly infinite void of possible questions and different resources I can be going to that can be very intimidating. As I provide that structure, I am reining people in, and I am at least giving them that direction to go seek answers for themselves.
I love it. And let's go back to, okay, so now maybe there's a team. And again, I don't think it's necessarily different at a brand or internally at an agency, but it's more so, okay, so now that we've sort of identified people that we want to collaborate with to level up the overall Amazon advertising performance for the brands that we're working on, for the brand or brands that we're working on. How is it important for an agency or an in-house team to have a very strong consensus about how things get managed? And I'll tell you, I've seen brands do this before, where like one person, like maybe there's 3 or 4 people that understand Amazon marketing and are interested in Amazon marketing and want to do it and see the value in it. So one person will do one thing. and then another person does another thing, and then another person does another thing, and it's sort of like probably all good things, but it's almost like, you'd hope it's all good things, but it's not in sync. Like everyone's sort of doing things slightly different. One person might have one budget philosophy, even as simple as like, budgets. Okay, maybe a campaign typically spends $100 a day, but they go in and do the thing where like they set the budget to like $1,000 a day because
I don't want it to run out during the day. Yeah.
You never want it to run out. And somebody else looks at that and says, "Oh, I'm very budget conscious. I'm going to set it to $110 per day."
Yeah.
Right. Like even as simple as that, just that's one micro decision, and then I like multiply that by all the hundreds of decisions that anyone would ever make in a week. You can get people like almost like tug of warring an account.
I do think.
How do people get on the same stage? Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a very different conversation if you are managing one account with multiple people, and this is sort of the sandbox, and say, everybody, you got to play nice, share your toys, versus saying everybody has your own sandbox that you're trying to at least experiment with. I don't think there's an issue with people experimenting with different types of strategies and different types of tactics. I do think there's an issue with people changing if everybody's saying, we're all managing the same campaigns, right, and I go and make one change, and then the next person comes in and they overwrite my changes to make their own.
Yeah.
That is not a situation that you can have. There is absolutely a too many cooks in the kitchen type of situation you can get involved in. I think the push I would make for people, because again, my core thing here is that testing and experimenting, especially when you're in a new zone of learning and you don't have all of the experience in the world, testing is how you're going to learn more. Make sure that you have an intentionality to your tests. You should always, if you're trying out something for the very first time, generate your hypothesis. What do I think this is going to do? And also understand, like, well, what am I just trying to learn? Because there's a difference between saying, hey, I'm going to try out a really cool placement strategy and we're just going to see what happens, versus saying, hey, this cool placement strategy is trying to get really aggressive on top of search placements, very low on general bids. We're trying to see if we can shift everything so that instead of spending half of our ad dollars going towards product page placements, 25% on rest of search, 25% on top of search, we want to see if we can actually shift all of this up to get 50 to 60% showing on top of search. And if we're successfully able to do that, will we actually see the ROAS come the way that we want it to? Or is this actually just going to be, oh no, this actually doesn't scale too well at all? This, like, yes, we can do the thing in terms of moving our placements around, but that's still not actually turning into good performance for our products. If you take that time to ask those second order questions, really understand what you're trying to accomplish, then you can measure it and then you can document it. And it still may not be something that works for every single brand every single time, but now you are at least understanding, as your team is trying to build out their skill set and build out their playbooks, I know why what I did worked or didn't work. And so now when a future situation comes up where I need to make a similar decision, I have a reason to pull back on and not just, felt good.
Hey, everybody. I want to take a quick break in the middle of this episode just to mention, Mike mentioned something really great about auditing accounts. One thing that I found that people absolutely love when they are auditing an account or even their own account periodically and on a regular basis is our Poor Performers tool inside AdBadger's software. What our Poor Performers tool does is it lists for you in a very simple table that you can access regularly. It tells you about your non-converting spend keywords so that you can go in there and take action on them very regularly. This way, you can always keep tabs on the keywords that have spent the most without conversions. So a lot of people really enjoy that part of our tool. If you want more information on that, there's a link in the description to basically book a demo and see it in our demo video. Let's jump back to the episode. I'm actually really enjoying the conversation with Mike here. Let's go. And I also think from a tangible, like, what do I do task, there's one thing I think, like, here's a piece of homework for people to like actually do that I've seen work wonders. It's almost like, Michelangelo is working on the David sculpture, and he has got a big block of marble, and he is like chipping away at it with his chisel. Every once in a while, he has to like go 50 feet back and look at it and be like, how is everything shaping up? And the action item that I found works wonders is, you go and you do work in an account and you're like down in the weeds, you're like chipping away at stuff. You need to take a step back and do a sync session in the sense of like, what are the goals again? Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to like scale ad spend or decrease ad spend? Because I think you can have really good agreement about like, oh, okay, like if we're trying to scale ad spend, like what does that actually look like? And that sort of informs the micro decisions that get made. So I can't tell you how many, and I don't think that's a natural thing for many people to like step back, like literally like hands up, don't touch your keyboard. Like, let's just take a step back and look at what we're trying to do. What is the goal? I've seen, talented, well-intentioned, hardworking, really motivated people. And, if you ask them in the middle of the week, in the middle of the month, like, hey, what's the ad spend level that we're trying to spend this month? And like, what's the goal for that particular campaign or brand or whatever? And they might say, oh, I don't actually have that written down.
Yeah.
Like, meaning they're so down in the weeds. So I feel like having that shared high level philosophy of like high level strategy can help inform all the micro decisions, because it's really difficult to literally micromanage, like micro all of the decisions. I think it's much different to have just like overall shared strategy. So I think one example might be, what would be the philosophy, like what is the shared strategy of trying to modify existing campaigns? Like, do we as a company want to, what is best practice? Like, can we all agree on the general best practice of, do we, if we approach an account, what's our propensity to want to pause every single campaign and relaunch new things? Like, do we have these shared philosophies of how to approach some big decisions? And of course, the biggest decision for a campaign would be like, are we trying to scale it? What are our targets? So having good, clear targets written down. I always advise people, so we use ClickUp, to actually put the goal in the description of the ClickUp board. So like, there's a title of the ClickUp board, and then there's a description. And it's like, you always see a little sliver of this description, like put the goal right there. So every time you go and you look at this board, you see the goal, and that hopefully, and I've seen it work well, is hopefully inform the micro actions that eventually get done.
Yeah.
So that you can talk about big picture. And then of course you can do a retrospective and say, okay, this was the big thing that we were going after. What actions did we take to get there that we thought works really well? How do we know? So it's a lot of like big picture, what are we doing to get there? And then retrospective or like reflection on, did we actually accomplish that? What actions did we do? And like, what's our evidence for saying this or the other thing? So I think those are really valuable points to consider.
No, I completely agree with you. I have some funny anecdotes back at Perch when we were maybe first getting things kicked off. And at that time, we had a lot of different agency partners that we were working with. Like, I think when I started at the company, we had 5 different agencies before my first day, where we just said, we have the brands, we got to figure out something to do with them. And there was one instance in which I was working with a company, and some of the brand managers we had were very unhappy with the overall ad performance they were generating for us. This is a situation where we acquired a brand. It had the previous agency, so we maintained that agency relationship to evaluate it. Mm-hmm. And the team was very unhappy with where the efficiency was. And I checked in and I said, hey, what are the goals that you guys are operating with? I said, oh, previous brand owner had us running at a 50% ACOS on all of these campaigns. Our team was expecting everything to get down to like a 25% ACOS, so something like that number. That had never been communicated out to the other agency. And so it was just purely nobody knows what the goal is.
Mhm.
So of course nobody's going to be happy, and we're going to be constantly butting heads over like, why is performance so bad? This isn't profitable. We're contribution negative. What's going on? It's like, no, that's literally the goal that you guys had technically given us, because you just said, oh, whatever the previous brand owner was doing, let's do that while we catch our footing,
Right.
during this integration. So
I can't tell you how common that is, especially when the goal is qualitative. Like, I want more sales. And it's like, okay, like, what does more mean to you? Like, when the person actually says a qualitative statement like that, they generally, it's like based on a feeling, right? And, or like, I want to lower a cost. Well, it's like, how much lower? Like, what is the actual target? Like, what will satisfy and why?
yeah,
Do you think that is the number, right? So a lot of people come to goals in a sort of a qualitative way, a feeling based way, and that definitely puts a strain on every single action of the relationship. So yeah, try to be explicit as possible when it comes to goal setting, big time.
and then I'll tie into that when you have conflicting goals. An example from my past is we care a lot about end of day profit dollars, but we also need to maintain an end of day profit percentage. You cannot always get both of those things at the same time, especially if you maybe try to add a qualifying factor of that being, we need that for those profit dollars to be up year over year, and we need to maintain an efficiency level. When you have multiple factors at the same time, you need to have an internal tie break, so that when you end up in an inevitable situation where we're in fact not going to hit all of the goals. I think if anything, if you're hitting 100% of your goals, you're setting really bad goals. You're probably setting things way too conservatively. If that's the case, that in those situations, you need to be able to have the conversations to say, well, when we're needing to make a decision between profit dollars or profit percentage, which one do we prioritize up front?
So first big takeaway, hopefully people are walking away with, is shared goals and shared philosophies.
Yep.
Spend a lot of time talking about the macro, and it should inform a lot of the micro that gets done on a day-to-day. Now, in terms of the micro, let's actually talk about the tangible thing for the micro, meaning like the day-to-day tasks that get done in an account.
Yeah.
What have you seen works well, in the sense of, even in an individual brand, let's say they hire someone in-house who's their in-house marketer, and that person leaves for some reason. You know, the classic hit by a bus principle. Let's say somebody gets hit by a bus. What do you do? Because now they're incapacitated and they can't even tell the next person what to do. Shared company knowledge database. How have you seen that work in an Amazon marketing context? Have you noticed any tools to help out in this process?
Yeah. So this is a really, really good question. And I need to contextualize it in the idea of, if you are running a business, and we'll take that earlier example, you're a brand owner, you don't necessarily have any of the ad experience yourself. And maybe in this world, you had one advertising person, and now you don't have that person anymore. You are going to set, I would say, no matter what, if you're in that situation, there is going to be some sort of transitional loss. There's going to be some decisions made that would not have been made if there was no change. And that's okay. Like, we accept that as part of life.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing is to understand first, what is your appetite and willingness to learn through a transition. Because if you're saying, we're running a very large ship here and we need to have a captain in charge of every aspect of it, you need to go ahead, find yourself an expert, find yourself an agency, find yourself a consultant, or try to immediately hire. I would honestly say go the agency or consultant route, because hiring that person full time, there's probably more decisions you want to make that if you were on a time crunch, you're probably unable to move as quickly as you'd like, as opposed to finding an agency, someone who has that experience, I would say is a bit safer. That's the first thing. once you've sort of said, okay, we at least have the knowledge in the room that we need, now you can start to say, to a certain point, you get a blank canvas. This is not, oh no, I have to figure out what to do. This is saying, I now have the fun opportunity of saying, there are probably some bad habits at play before. Nobody is perfect. Your past person wasn't perfect. Your next person is not going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
There are going to be decisions made either way that are probably technically suboptimal with perfect hindsight. And when you are gleefully accepting that reality, now you get to start to have those conversations of, what do I want to accomplish? And you go from there. Maybe you're a business owner and you say, I bring on advertising people, so I don't have to think about that. In which case, okay, you're probably bringing on an advertising person who has their own core philosophies and who says, hey, if you give me a direction, I want to be growing top line sales, I want to be growing bottom line profit, I want to just be getting more market share, whatever the high level goal is. Now you can say, use your expertise, that's why I'm bringing you into the room, for you to put together this action plan for how we're going to accomplish things. And if you're bringing in somebody who has their own core philosophies, they're going to love this opportunity.
Yeah. I think that's such an important distinction for a brand. When you hire someone in-house, it's normal for a company to document its processes, right? So when you have, employees, it's normal to have them document their processes to build up your internal company database.
Yeah.
I would say it's not normal to hire an agency and then tell them to give me your processes because I want to put them in my company database, right? That's one of the biggest distinctions between whether the decision around going in-house or not. Meaning, like, is this a process that you want to own? I mean, how many brands, I'm talking like gigantic brands like Bose or like Beats by Dre or like stuff like that, they make their product and then they outsource all of the marketing and creative to somebody else, to a proper, like, an agency, because they just say that's not our core competency.
Yeah.
And like, we don't want that to be one of our competencies. We don't even want to think about it. We want to hand it off. I'm talking about like gigantic Fortune 100 companies that pay millions of dollars to accounting firms because they didn't want an in-house accountant, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not, hiring they're not hiring that accounting firm and then telling the accounting firm to like teach them how to do accounting, so that eventually they could so like, it's a really interesting thing that some brands approach an agency relationship with, but it's more like, the Fortune 100 company outsourcing their finance, accounting to an accounting firm and paying that accounting firm millions of dollars, right? Same thing with legal or something like that. Like, most people listening to this podcast probably do not have a full-time in-house counsel, right? Where you pay an attorney to work for you full-time. You outsource it. Like, you yourself don't become a lawyer. So I think it's a really interesting part of e-commerce marketing that people don't consider that. Like, most business owners I talk to, like, they don't hire a lawyer, like, on a contract basis, expect the lawyer to teach them, and eventually want to fire the lawyer so that they can do their own lawyering. But for whatever reason, a lot of brands have that philosophy when they hire an agency or a contractor. They're like, okay, I'm going to hire you just for a little bit, and then eventually, like, I'm going to do it in-house. It's a really interesting decision that I think people just really need to consider. Now, granted, lawyering, accounting isn't necessarily the same as Amazon marketing, and there's a good argument that a company should be in charge of their own marketing and have good control of it, and there's an argument to maybe not do it. With all that being said, where was I going with this? I'll get off my soapbox. That was a soapbox moment.
No, I love it. I think one thing that people probably don't consider nearly as much as they should is that if you want top tier people, you are either, one, paying a ridiculous amount of money to have them, and then you're likely not using them in the most efficient way for your dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the people who have the absolute best advertising experience, like, they know all of the right moves. And again, all of the right moves is still you're talking about like an NBA, like win by math, right? Like take enough 3-pointers. It's not that all of your 3-point shots are going to go in. It's that if you can out math the opponent, you're going to win more games than you lose. I think advertising is a lot of the same way. You're not making 100% of the right decisions, but you're using the math to figure out what the right directions to be taking things are based on the goals you want to hit. And so when you have that person who understands the philosophies and understands the how to execute accordingly, there are some actions in there that are very low dollar value impact and very like low dollar value to execute. But when you have that full-time person, you're paying that person their full-time salary, whether they're doing the low volume stuff or the high volume stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you at least get to work with an agency, there's probably more of a mix of how are you executing that between members of a team.
Mm-hmm. I dig it. And I also wanted to give people, like on a practical basis, have you ever used, so I mean, the most rudimentary would be like a Google Doc, where it's like you hire someone on your team and you tell them where the Google Docs are to do things a certain way. Have you ever documented processes and handed lists of stuff to hey, this is the way that I think it's the best way to do it. And if you have any feedback on it, please comment on it. Have you done that? Have you done Google Docs?
Yes, definitely.
Have you used any other tools? Have you used any other tools like SOP specific type stuff, like company systems specific type stuff?
Yes. There's one, I'm blanking on the name of it. It's one of the Atlassian products.
Mm-hmm.
Where
right.
Yeah. So
people can find it. Yeah,
exactly.
I know what it is. Yeah, it's like the Atlassian company knowledge base thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, and the fact that we both are aware of this but don't know the name of it means that you stopped using it. So what was it about having an internal company knowledge base that you eventually walked away from? And where are you now? Are you back on Google Docs?
Yeah, so I'm back on Google Docs personally. For me, at Perch, we used a bunch of the different Atlassian products. So that was just like where we were operating as a team. I think a heavy aspect of that was the core users or a lot of the tech team, like the engineers themselves. And then my team said, well, if we have access to this, yeah, we're going to use it. Keep the entire company. If anybody needs to access things, then we know where we're going. Google Docs can be a little bit messier when you have multiple different teams. Back now in the agency, like, we're a lot smaller than Perch at its height, and we also don't have a very large engineering team that needs to use that. So from our side, we're getting 80-90% of the value out of a product that's free.
Yeah. I think in the future, one thing I've been looking into for systems in Google Docs is basically taking those Google Docs, feeding them to, basically building your own internal company ChatGPT. And there's services now that have that. The one I was looking at was Tetra, and it's basically that where you give it your Google Docs, and then you can chat with them. So team members can basically go to it and like type in, what's our company philosophy on anything? What's our company philosophy on delivering a report, or what's the way that we deliver a report each month? And it will then just like spit out. So sort of like conversing with your computer, I think will become more and more popular, which I actually think will make adherence to like the company standards a lot easier, because you'll just be able to like type in a chat, like, hey, how do I do blank? And it will just give you the doc, and it will give you the excerpt from the doc that it thinks is valuable to you. I think that's the future of for sort of following SOPs.
I'm a big fan of that. I think tied to that, I'm doing research, and I don't have any that I can recommend right now, but into those just like plugins where you have the AI note taker, so that in all of your calls, you can also just get like those notes generated. I think you can apply that just as well to the SOP videos.
For sure. And then you can converse with your call transcripts. It's like, what did Mike say this thing needs to get due by? And it'll just like tell you.
Exactly.
It's going to be cool. It'll be cool.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, hopefully I think so. I think people have finished this episode with a better sense and philosophy about, and better first principles about how to build teams, manage teams, have a shared company knowledge so that everyone can stay on the same page when it comes to all the decisions that someone can make. And hey, one quick question. You mentioned that you're using brand analytics a lot.
Oh yeah.
In sort of your initial audits to try to determine where value is. Could you just close us out with just how you've been using it, so that if someone's listening to it, they can look at their own brand analytics and be like, oh, wow, there's some opportunity for me.
Yeah, I love it. This is probably my favorite topic. So I am looking at brand analytics, search query performance every single month. And for some clients, we're using the weekly changes. When I do an audit view, the things that I'm looking at is I try to break out every single search term into one of 6 buckets. So I try to get an understanding of the high priority keywords. What are the things that have a really clear tie to their market where we can start to measure your market share on? I want to identify your brand defense. I want to identify your actual competitor conquesting on their competitor names. And then I want to break out discovery into 3 buckets to say high degree of possibility this will be successful for you, low degree of success for you, and no degree of success for you. And so I'll break all of those out to say, what's your actual market competitive rates? So what's your conversion rate versus the market? What's your impression share? What's your click share? What's your purchase share? I'll then break that out by how much money are you spending on each of these buckets? And is that efficient for you? 9 times out of 10, this ends up showing pretty easily, hey, the things that I'm defining as no chance of success and low chance of success, those are going to be your highest ACoS values. And in some instances, those actually make up over half of your ad spend.
Right.
That's the easiest area where we can say there is a disconnect between your products and the way you are finding customers. And then we can start to see, well, here are the high priority top of market terms that you should be going after. And it doesn't actually mean that's the highest funnel terms. Sometimes it's middle of the funnel. But the idea is that these are areas that we have first party data proof that this is how people are finding total like products that they can drive purchases on. I only like to look at items where I can try to contextualize, hey, what's your market cap on these terms? What's the estimated amount of sales from a dollar perspective that the market is generating on that mix of terms? And it will just blend all of that together to say, where's your opportunity to go more aggressive, but then also where's your opportunity where you are probably way too aggressive already. And there's a very easy, like, this is not saying spend more money. This is saying reallocate the money you're currently spending. I do that in the audit stage. I'll then also do that every single month to check back in on that exact mix. And then for some clients, we're also doing that every single week because we're getting real in the weeds with it.
I love it. Well, hopefully next time on the show, we can go in a little bit more in depth of that process because it sounds amazing.
Let's set it up.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show. And in case people want to get in touch with you and say, hey, really enjoyed that episode that you did, what's the easiest place for people to get in touch with you?
Number one place for people to connect with me is LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Mike Freaky. Try to keep it simple. But then otherwise, reach out via the IGPPC website. We have a really good contact form in there. Put my name in the byline and just
amazing. And have so much fun in Japan and China. Wishing you a fantastic trip.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited.
Alrighty. Have a good one.
A great one.
And everyone else, I'll see you next week here on the PPC Den Podcast.